People start to join here.
Yeah, good day, everybody. Are we people coming in now, Troy?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, great. Good to see everybody today for the Learn With Us, Western IM Learn With Us, second part of the series in information governance. And happy to be here with my good friend Jason Stearns again for the second issue of this presentation. And nice today to have Troy with us again. Troy Sawyer from Western IM. Troy is the guy that makes all the wheels turn here at Western IM. He's also the director of development here at Western IM. So he has
Thanks, sir.
lots of hats to wear.
Irene, there's a name I haven't seen in a while. Hi, Irene.
Yeah, it's nice to look down the list of people in our case to be able to see who's on the webinar today. A lot of friends there in the list. Really
Yep.
happy to see that. So the Learn With Us has been around for about I guess 5 years now. We continue to do ongoing sessions, education sessions. It's not a sales thing at all. It's just during COVID, we thought that we needed more education for our group here in Canada, particularly on Canadian content. And so we started to do that. We're going to continue to do that. And actually, what we're going to do is do progressively kind of deeper kind of detail on some of these topics. Because a lot of you are not new to the profession. And of course, you're looking for deeper information about a lot of the topics. That's why I'm happy to have Jason here with me today. Jason's not only a really good friend, but he's probably the most knowledgeable guy about information governance in North America right now, uh, for many reasons. Not the least of which is he's the chair of the Content Development Committee for ARMA International,
Yeah.
and was responsible for the development of the IGIM in ARMA International as well, up to the 2 and 2.1 levels. And soon, Jason, hopefully to be a 3 level at some point. I'll let you
Oh,
talk.
we'll get there. We'll get there.
What I want to say also is there's a QA here. So, sorry, there's a chat here. If you have questions or whatever, you're welcome to put things in the chat. Happy to talk about things along the way if need be. And Troy will kind of monitor that as well to help us with that. So, Jason, I'll let you go ahead and bring up your slide deck and you can introduce yourself.
Right. All right, so here we go. So today we're going to talk about the recent update to the IGIM that brought it to version 2.1. This announcement was made at the InfoNext conference in Savannah, Georgia, back in, what was that, May, April? April. Time flies. Now it's June. So the official announcement was made there. The content update to version 2.1 has also been published to the ARMA International website. What we're going to do today is focus on the changes that were made and some of the thought processes behind them. This is my very long bio. Short version is, first paragraph says, I've been doing this for an awfully long time, both at the chapter and international level on the board of directors. Spent most of my career working in-house at large financial services companies like BlackRock, Citadel, UBS, New York Life. I'm a nerd with lots of degrees and letters after my name, most recently earning a master's in legal studies from Drexel Law in cybersecurity and information privacy. And outside of that, I am an avid yogi. I practice on average twice every day. I'd like to travel a lot. Matter of fact, I'm leaving tomorrow for Germany and Austria. And I have 4 cats. Don't ask me why I have 4 cats, but I have 4 cats, one of which will likely make an appearance during our conversation today. She seems to have a sixth sense about when I'm sitting in front of my computer giving a presentation versus just sitting in front of my computer working. She seems to know the difference. Maybe it's the talking. And outside of that, I'm a big fan of cooking, plants, and RuPaul's Drag Race and all of its various iterations across the globe. Subtitles are a beautiful thing. So that's the short version of my bio. Rick, nobody knows you.
Well, there's days when they might not want to know me, but As most of you know me fairly well. I've known a lot of you for 20 plus years, so happy to see you on the list today, all of you. I'm the president of Western IM and been in the records and information management business for 30 years now. 30 years in ARMA, and before that in the content management space. So been around for quite a long time. Happy to have received my my ARMA FAI on stage with Jason in where were we, Jason, when we got those?
Right.
Houston, right?
Houston. Yeah.
Houston, yeah.
Here before.
So really happy about that. Probably the only real letters I ever wanted to have after my name was an ARMA FAI. So very pleased about that. Happy to be able to do a deeper dive today on this topic, and we will of course be doing an ongoing maybe update talk later on in 2026 as well about how things are going and what's happening, and just kind of maybe more topics on the information governance side of the house. So that's it for me.
All right. So what we're going to cover today is the IGIM update to 2.1. We'll do that by starting with a brief history of how the model got its start, how we got to where we are. We'll do an overview of the overall model, and then we'll do the comparison and review of what was changed, why it was changed, what the thought process was behind it. And then we'll talk about some of the things that we're planning next, both for the model and some other work that ARMA is doing in relation to the model, and a couple other related projects that will probably impact the model. We should have time at the end for questions, but of course, please feel free to ask as we're going along. That's what the little chat box is for. And we're happy to clarify something or dig a little deeper if you're interested. Just let us know, and we'll make sure we make the time to do that. So with that being said, let's start with a little bit of a history on the IGIM. The original version of the IGIM had a kind of soft launch in late 2019. An article was released by ARMA, I think in conjunction with a vendor partner at the time, but kind of proposing what was version 1. Some of you may remember it was called the honeycomb model because the modules were arranged with hexagons and it looked like a honeycomb. That version of the model had its official debut in Legal Tech New York in February of 2020. Well, there's one of the cats, not the usual one either. And let's go back. There we go. No. There we go. And then for those of you not familiar with the Legal Tech Conference, it happens both in New York and LA at different times of the year. It focuses, as you would suspect by the name, on the technology side of the legal business. So that's everything from e-discovery platforms to legal hold management, billing, client management, and all those types of things. ARMA has been a big supporter of legal tech over the years and usually gets a dedicated track of content education during the conference, and they took advantage of that in 2020 to announce the IGIM. And then COVID happened. And even though the model did get a lot of good press and attention, both from the ARMA membership and a lot of the industry feedback, I kind of got lost in the shuffle of the world ending. The model did continue to limp along out there. It was referenced and used in a variety of ways. And then the IGP board of directors at that point, chaired by our good friend John Azaza, felt that to better align the IGP exam with the IGIM, an update to the IGIM would be needed. And that way they would be both tightly coupled, and one kind of supports the other. So that update was done and released in spring of 2022. In 2024, the ARMA International Content Standards and Development Committee launched the working group to update the IGIM to version 2.1. This was a working group that varied in size over the months that it worked on, but averaged 8 to 10 people participating in each call, various industries, backgrounds, experience levels with records management and information governance. But the thing was we did want it to be informed by people practicing in the field. And that was very evident by the people who volunteered. We also wanted to make sure that we were addressing some of the new challenges that IG professionals are dealing with, some of the clarifications that you'll see, really try to take advantage of that. One very deliberate omission is still wrestling with one of those challenges, and we'll talk to that at the end when we talk about what work is planned. And really overall, the update tried to focus on improving the overall clarity and usability of the model to help support IG professionals and the initiatives that they're undertaking at their various organizations. So that's the brief history. Before I dive into an overview of the model itself, so Rick, you're no stranger to the creation of ARMA key standards, key among them being the principles, and you've been involved in updates as well of those said principles.
Yeah.
You know, over the years, what would you say is, why is that important to us as a profession?
Well, in my opinion, Jason, the kind of movement of the ARMA principles along the kind of rails is a very, very important thing. I'm on one of the committees right now where we are fortunately moving to update the ARMA principles as well, and my sense is that the ARMA principles are going to be around with ARMA for a very, very long time in the future as that kind of segment that deals with records and information management and how an organization is structured to be able to deal with records and information management. Information governance to me is a much kind of deeper and more overarching topic about a whole bunch of different disciplines and how they interact within an organization. So I'm really excited to kind of blend what we can with the ARMA principles into the going forward with the ARMA IGIM model to make them both interact correctly along the way. So really happy about that. We have some really fantastic people on the committee looking at that particular ARMA principle side right now.
Yep. All right. So for those not familiar with the IGIM, essentially what it is designed to be is a framework that tries to graphically represent all of the components that go into an information governance program, whether it's a formal role, a formal function, or some type of role, discipline, or skill that needs to be reflected in the program. It tries to do all that by building out this framework so that you know the areas that you need to kind of monitor, maybe improve, maybe rely on because they're maybe a bit more mature. So if you're in an industry that has a lot of regulation around information security, you might rely more heavily on your information security program counterparts because they've been there and done that, right? But it gives organizations guidance they need in implementing their program, managing it going forward, and in a way that does it with the larger organizational objectives, so that, where do the business groups fit into the overall structure? Mainly that's going to be at the steering committee level, but there are other ways that you'll be interacting with those businesses, and that's represented in the model by some of the supporting functions and skills that you'll need. When done properly, information governance and the use of the model in helping you build out information governance will help organizations better comply with legal, regulatory, and industry-specific type requirements. Anything from very onerous sets of regulations like we have in the US in the financial services sector to more broad requirements like payment processing, which are kind of universal. The model itself consists of 8 top-level domains with 41 subdomains. And the 41 comes from the version 2.1 of the model. The current version the prior version 2.0, I think only had 38 domains, but don't quote me on that. We changed a few things around along the way. So what did we do? Why did we do it? The update to 2.1, like I said, really was focusing on trying to clarify the model. We do have some significant changes in the works that we'll be proposing as part of the version 3 update, but the working group felt some of these simpler changes were important enough to do the 2.1 release at this stage. That the clarity was needed. We had to fix one whoopsie that occurred when it went from version 1 to version 2. So we did that. And then overall, again, that focus on clarity and making it easier both for the IG practitioners to understand the model, but their stakeholders when they take the model or portions of the model to facilitate a discussion or something like that. So this is version 2. Many of you have probably seen this before. It's sometimes called the pinwheel or just the wheel. It has the 8 domains with the steering committee at the center, with the idea being the steering committee touches each of these other domains. And then the domains of authorities, supports, procedural framework, capabilities, information lifecycle, architecture, and infrastructure. Each of those domains then breaks down into the variety of subdomains that you see here. And each of those subdomains is meant to further clarify the role or purpose of the top level domain. And then in some areas also you'll see where there's some connections or overlap into other areas. So this is version 2.1, and you're going to say to me, Jason, it looks exactly the same. And mostly you're right. We did make one change at the top level domain, and that is here in the support domain. We change it from supports to support functions, really to emphasize the point that the areas that appear in this domain are components, not necessarily of the IG program itself, but of an organization or things that the organization will need to properly implement and support information governance efforts in the long term. Things like project management, change management, those types of issues. Still breaks down into subdomains. We did simplify the graphics a little bit. One of the reasons, just visual, if you remember from the prior slide, the old graphic looked like file folders. This does not. We didn't want to have that kind of subliminal reference to paper. We still get pigeonholed as being the people who are responsible for paper, even though we do so much more. And so we wanted to get rid of that reference. And then we did expand some of the domains or clarify some of the names a little bit, some of the subdomains, I should say, as part of the 2.1 update. And that's what we're going to go through a little bit for you now. So again, as I said, the only real change at the top level was the change of supports to support functions. This was strictly for clarity. When we were discussing with peers and other members of the committee going into the working group going in, the top level domain name of supports just seemed to not be as clear as we needed, and actually was confusing for some. So that was a very simple change, not a big deal. At the steering committee level, which is the first domain, we did make some changes, mainly here at the end. Initially, when the IGIM was put together, records management was very deliberately left off because the thought process was, well, if there's an IG program from the ARMA point of view, it likely builds out of the traditional records management function. So it would be redundant to include it. And we wanted to separate out the fact that IG is something separate from records management. So why bring it up again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That more than likely did us a disservice, even though the intention was well, by not mentioning records and information management as needing to have a seat at the table. It kind of reinforced that IG and RIM are essentially maybe the same thing. And we've seen this at organizations that have simply rebranded their records management function and IG function without making any other changes to their scope of work, their responsibility, or their goals and initiatives. The other thing we added for clarity was we changed security specifically to information security. While yes, technically we could be interested in other types of security, like physical security, particularly if you are responsible for any type of traditional paper record center or any type of warehouse that manages physical artifacts. I used to work with a patent and trademark firm back when I worked with law firms, and their record center actually had like 3D models of items that had been copyrighted or trademarked as part of the work the firm did. It was really interesting to have to go and pull down the Fraggle Rock, for those of you who remember that television show, the model of the village, which was something that they had worked on. So not your traditional record keeping, but a little bit of a side to say that, yes, we understand security is broader than information security, but really from an IG perspective, we're focusing on the information security aspects and want their input into the program development and the requirements that get established by the IG program. When it comes to the authorities, again, not a lot of change here. We kept it the same as you see. Again, mainly just the changing of the graphic at this point to try and break that tie with physical. But overall, the areas under authorities, these are the things that both formally and informally can impact how an information governance program is initiated and ultimately maintained. Things like the culture, are you a risk-averse organization versus one that's, move fast and break things, to quote the old Google saying. How regulated are you? I always take a little bit of umbrage with the regulated and unregulated. No one's unregulated. Once you employ more than just yourself, you're regulated. The question is to which degree that are you regulated? And typically, if you're government, finance, energy, pharma, those are the most heavily, at least in the US, regulated industries, and that tends to hold up across the globe. And other than that, we kept this domain essentially the same. With the supports, as I mentioned, we moved it from supports to support functions. And this was that whoopsie I mentioned before. And the move from version 1 to version 2, the edit inadvertently left off change management as a support function, even though the IGP exam has a whole section focusing on change management. So we had to remedy that and fix that for going forward for the exam. When we had to do the last exam mapping exercise, we had to get creative to be able to keep those change management questions in the exam. Change management is, I think, key because for a lot of organizations, making the transition from a traditional records outlook to a more broad IG outlook, you're going to have to change the way people think about not only your function, but the way that they do things, how they access things, if they access things. A lot of it going hand in hand with the related disciplines like privacy, security, the technology teams as well. But change management, I think, becomes important because that is one way of helping coordinate those efforts and coordinating the messaging around that change by having some type of recognized change management effort, whether it's a formal department or function within your organization. I, through most of my career, have worked at very large institutions where we had a PMO and we had a change management function. So if I was managing a large project, I didn't have to be the PMO or the project manager, rather. I could rely on the PMO to lend me a project manager for the duration of the project who would help me with all that project management stuff. The fact of the matter is, whether you work for a large organization like that or not, project management is a key component of effectively implementing IG because a lot of the work we get done is through short and long-term projects. So you need to, even if it's just for yourself as the IG professional, have some basic knowledge of project management capabilities and understandings and methodologies just to make sure that you keep things on track. Same thing with the rest of those domains. Those could be specific functions, large organizations like BlackRock, all my emails are written for me by a communications team, back and forth, but it would come out from the communications team, not directly from me, because that's how large enterprise-wide communications were handled at an organization of that size. You're working at a smaller to mid-sized organization, it may be perfectly normal for people to just email the entire organization right from their main mailbox. But you still want to make sure that you've got a coordinated communication effort, that there's some thought behind what's being said, when it's being said, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what's meant by communications as a domain, as a subdomain here. So Rick, I always joke that over the years of getting to know you, you're the one who always keeps reminding me that, not everyone, Jason, works for the 10,000 person organization. What does this mean for them? So you've become the little like angel on my shoulder, whispering in my ear to remind my colleagues when we were working on this update, how do we frame this so it's meaningful for organizations independent?
Right. And then so it should be. It should be meaningful to organizations of any size.
Right.
Because information governance is not just for big companies or even medium-sized companies. It's for every size company. Every company would benefit from doing information governance.
Yeah. And of course, how detailed and how big depends on resources, importance, risk, all these different things, which again show up in other areas of the model. Procedural framework. This is another one where we didn't make a whole lot of change. We did simplify policies, procedures, rules, and guidelines just to say policies and guidelines. Most people, rightly or wrongly, use policies and procedures to mean the same document, even though technically they are different. We all know that. Just for simplicity, we tried to tighten this up a little bit, just so it was a little less verbose. The rest of this domain remains unchanged. These are your formal policies, procedures, what have you, formal role descriptions. Again, depending on the size and type of organization you're in, those formalized roles may be very robust. They may be just very simple. It could be just something as simple as a title. But the idea here is making sure we understand who has what role within the organization and the IG program so that 2 blocks over, you can properly assign accountability to certain aspects of the program. Understanding what does accountability mean from an IG perspective, who's responsible for what and when. And of course, the benchmarking, whether that's benchmarking to your internal standards, setting internal goals and marking yourself against those goals, or against, peer organizations or just industry trends. You can look at ARMA annually releases the maturity index report. You might want to rate yourself against the maturity index overall. You may want to rate it yourself against, people in your market sector. But that's a tool that you can use to say, hey, most organizations report themselves as being a maturity of 3.5. We're only coming in at a 2. Maybe we need to do a little bit more work, or whatever it happens to be. That's just one way.
Mm-hmm.
Capabilities. Again, this is a section that did not really change. We felt this was fine as it is. This really talks about, how do users within the organization do their work when it comes to accessing and utilizing information. So what type of information access do they have? Why do they have it? Should they have it, etc. What role does privacy play within the organization? Depending on the type of data that you're collecting and the country that you're operating in, you may or may not be caught by some of the more robust privacy regimes like GDPR coming out of the EU, like LGPD coming out of Brazil. I know we spoke about this last time, Rick. Canada has got a pretty good privacy regime, even though it is going through some revisions that are way behind. In the United States, I say we don't have privacy. We have Google and Meta, and a little bit of Apple. And now Planeteer or Planet. What's that data mining thing that one of our oligarchs is trying to shove down all our throats? Anyway.
Yes.
So it talks about those types of things with search. Why are people searching? How do they search? Are they doing it correctly? And then also in important. Thank you, Ken. I was close. And what do they do when search doesn't work for them? Are they recreating content? Are they relying on old content and hoping it's good enough? Stuff like that. So those are some of the ideas behind search. For the information lifecycle, this went through a significant change. So the early version, the version 1 of the IGIM was created in large part by a gentleman by the name of Nick Inglis. Many of you might remember Nick. He was involved with ARMA for a very long time, joined ARMA as a member of the HQ staff over content development and all of that. Created the first version of the IGIM, created or was heavily involved in the creation of the IGBOC and other various items during his years. Really smart, great guy. One of the things he tried to do, both with the information lifecycle and in aspects of the IGBOC, is he had very specific ways of referring to processes or procedures or different components or concepts within the IG and RIM space. Not wanting to put words in his mouth, he's not here. I don't mean to do that. But I think knowing Nick as well as I did over the years and working with him, I think what he was trying to do is separate out concepts more specific to electronic records management versus traditional record versus IG. And even though they're all related, trying to build some separation between the terms and the concepts. That resulted, unfortunately, in what I refer to as some Nickisms that never fully were adopted by the profession. And after years of trying to get some of these slightly different terminology and concepts adopted, we're going to cut our losses and go back to something a bit more traditional. Not that what he did was wrong or bad. It's just it hasn't really taken hold, and if anything, has probably muddied the waters more than was intended. Mm-hmm. So the life cycle as presented here has capture, collaboration, version control, retention, disposition, legal holds, and e-discovery. We did try to simplify this by going by aligning the stages of the information lifecycle to some of the more traditional steps that you probably are familiar with if you ever studied for your CRM exams. If you did any formal studies around records management, you've seen at least one lifecycle model, I'm sure. And that has some of the more traditional stages, such as creation and receipt. We still felt that for most organizations, you're either creating the content that then gets managed by their program, or you're receiving it externally and then bringing it into the organization. Capture just kind of felt like a step in that process, but not actually the stage itself. Similar with collaboration, we changed it back to usage, which is the more traditional stage in the information lifecycle. In discussing with the working group, a lot of us felt that collaboration is just one type of usage that information may go through. A lot of organizations create content and, that's it. It doesn't get used. You have to create it to comply with some regulatory reporting, or it's a end of month financial report that you're starting on the next one as soon as you've issued that one. So you don't really, maybe other than maybe for reference purposes, you don't collaborate on it. Other things go through lots of collaboration, internal project decks, marketing materials, manuals and training guides, and all of that goes through many, many iterations and lots of collaboration before they're finalized. Storage and retention, we felt it was necessary, particularly with cloud taking over and really impacting how people access and use information, that it was as important to pull out the storage aspect of the life cycle as it was the retention. Traditionally, they're separated out. We did tie them together because the reason you're storing things is because you're retaining it. Even if you're not retaining it as a record, you are retaining it in some form as information, as reference material somehow, some way. So we did storage and retention. I lost the battle on changing disposition to something else. The traditional records manager in me says disposition is a formal process that only occurs to records. Everything else is either deleted or destroyed. But this is one of those terms that has kind of become more of a catch-all over time. Kind of like we say data when we mean information. We say information when we mean record, and vice versa. Yeah, wasn't a battle I was willing to fight much more than to kind of make my claim, and I was overruled. That's why we have groups doing this and not just one person going through and rewriting everything. And then on legal holds and e-discovery, we really wanted to simplify this, and we thought about the lifecycle process generally, and it's really the legal hold that impacts the lifecycle, not the e-discovery process itself. It's the legal hold that prevents the information and records from being deleted. It prevents them from maybe even being further processed, depending on the nature of the legal hold. E-discovery is the process of then finding all of that information, but that's more akin to some of the search functions that exist elsewhere in the model and will probably be built out when we do that work as part of version 3. So that was really just more of a simplification. Then we get to the architecture. This was left intact, no real changes here. This is related to IT, but not necessarily just IT. You can have taxonomy in different ways. You can have formalized metadata structures. You can have the metadata that comes in automatically native from an application use. It's understanding those things, how they're being used. Can they be used to further drive program efforts and initiatives. Like I know some work that I've done with Rick, we know, and I'm sure as many of you know, Microsoft document dates aren't always reliable. So you look for other ways to find a more reliable metadata point if you need to make a decision based off of a date. So that's one example. See, we got a couple things popping up. Here's the difference. Okay. Let me go back.
Shelley's got her hand up here too.
Sure.
Did you have a question, Shelley? I'll turn on your mic. Is Shelley there?
It's still showing that she's muted. Oh, there it goes.
There she is.
Yep. No, couldn't hear you, Shelley.
Shelley, if you have a question, you can always just type it into one of the chat boxes and we'll address it that way.
Yeah, sure.
And Troy, just let me know because I don't always see those pop.
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, that's the architecture. Again, unchanged from version 2. But we did again update some of the graphics. Similar with infrastructure, this is more on the IT side of things, but not exclusively IT. Information security has more to it than just IT components, but it is, it is more related to IT than not. And this is again where storage comes in, storage platforms specifically. So you have storage as, oh, you need to store things, but then you have the actual platforms themselves. So this is where you start to see some of the overlap with the domains, that there are related concepts or tightly coupled concepts that appear in different parts of the top level domains, but in the subdomains, you can see how they're kind of a little bit more tied than we might think. And that's an important distinction that I'll speak more to when I talk about some of the work that's coming up. So that's all the changes we made to the domains, but we did some additional work. So for each of the top level domains, the working group drafted about 2 to 3 pages of descriptive content explaining the role and purpose of that top level domain, any ties it might have to the related domains, if there's alignment with other ARMA concepts such as the principles. So 2 to 3 pages of content for each. This has all been published as part of the release of 2.1 on the ARMA website. So you're welcome to just go there and find it. Easiest way is arma.org/IGIM, take you right there. There are other ways of getting there too, but that's all there. In addition, we created an implementation tip for each of the domains. So what is the, if you are trying to implement IG for the first time, what do you need to do if you're going to tackle the steering committee? What do you need to consider if you're looking at supporting functions? And they're meant to be kind of product or approach agnostic, not being too specific in the words, but in the weeds, but things you want to think about when you're tackling that aspect of the model. And then not only did we rename the various stages of the information lifecycle, we kind of re-envisioned it to modernize it based on how the working group felt that most organizations are accessing and utilizing information these days. Whether or not it makes it to the realm of record, the fact is people and organizations are accessing and using and keeping a lot of stuff. And we were trying to find a way to better reflect that in the model. So with that in mind, this is the lifecycle that was released as part of the release of version 2, I believe, of the IGIM. And up until very recently, you could still find on the ARMA International website. Has those very traditional steps, but with the NICISM names really, in some cases not even fully aligned because this was developed separately. But it's very linear. The thought is that the content goes through each one of these stages until it gets to the end where it's disposition or archiving. One of the challenges I have, and it's not the only one, but it lists holds and discovery as an actual step in the lifecycle process. But holds and discovery do not impact all the information within an organization. It's a matter of fact, unless you are in a very, very litigious organization, probably doesn't even impact a vast majority of your information.
In
Unless
Canada,
you get involved in one of these big litigations.
in Canada, very, very rarely do we talk about legal. I mean, we talk about legal holds being there, but there's not a lot of that here in Canada because it's not as litigious here, and certainly any settlements, and certainly we have legal legal situations in Canada, but the amount of money that is tied up in those is so much smaller and such a fraction of what happens in the US that we don't really talk about that a lot here in Canada.
Yeah, when it comes to litigation and a few other things, the U.S. has absolutely lost its mind. Now, worked out good for me because the Zubelik decisions came down, which completely redid the legal hold and e-discovery industry and dragged along records management with it.
Absolutely.
And that's right around the time that I entered the field more formally in a corporate role instead of as an outsourced or a consultant role. And, right time, right place, happened to grasp the concepts faster than even my attorneys did and was able to well position the organizations I worked with because I had the good understanding.
Yeah,
so
we can help to
record managers.
We can thank Judge Schindler for that a lot. She changed our world.
Yep. Whether she meant to or not. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, Carolyn, I've seen that as well. Or sometimes, even if you do have a records program, the attorneys who are issuing the legal hold don't have a good enough understanding. And they just say, oh, put everything related to. And so, for example, I used to work for a life insurance company. So put everything for agency on hold. Oh, okay, but the legal action only impacts the Northeast region in the United States. Why are we putting all agency records on hold, not just nationwide, but at that point, New York Life had a small international footprint as well. And in our international operations, we're not even, it's because they just didn't understand. They didn't know how to break it out. So yeah, that's a challenge. That's why IG is important. So good observation. Thank you, Carol. So what we decided to do with the working group is re-envision this lifecycle model to try to represent the fact that most organizations are keeping multiple copies of the same information. Depending on who has that piece of information at the time, it could be in one or more stages all at the same time. So this is what we've come up with. What we're trying to represent with that, multiple copies being in different stages is in that center part there, where you see usage, storage, retention, and version control all overlapping. We still think creation and receipt is a standalone process. You create the content, you receive it, and then it enters into the lifecycle. But it can stay in that middle section for an indeterminate period of time, depending on how the organization is or is not, in most cases, managing that information. Obviously, most organizations, if they've taken the effort to build out a records management program, probably have a better control on this for their records. But for all the other stuff within the organization, it kind of sits out there. And so I might create this PowerPoint deck and put it up on the network drive. This is maybe not a formal record because it's just a training that I've done for fun, but then someone else relies on it. And so they make a copy and put it on their network or SharePoint site. So now we've got 2 copies. Mine is strictly in storage phase because I'm not using it anymore. The other person is maybe, developing a training off of it. So now it's in a usage phase because now they're going to create maybe a whole new set of material based off of that information. If they do it properly, like I say, in records management, there's no such thing as living documents. There are properly version documents. So if they make a new version of my deck, that's where the version control stage comes in. And this can all be happening without any of my knowledge because maybe I made the document publicly available across the organization so anyone could rely on it. Other things are a bit more locked down and would follow a more traditional path. But the idea here is that, it can go round and round and round. Even a formal record that is maybe only in its retention phase is then used to make a new record. So that gets version controlled and that moves into a different part of the cycle all over again. So this is what we were trying today to show. The other thing you notice is that the legal hold is drawn around the outside. And the reason for that is if you think about how the legal hold process traditionally works, it prevents information from moving into the disposition phase. The whole point of the legal hold is to secure potentially relevant information within the organization so that it's not, in some cases, further processed, and in other cases, it would, prevent it from being deleted or accessed or what have you. So that was the idea here, and that's why the legal hold is drawn around the outside, with disposition being at the end.
Just to say though, Jason, it's not just legal holds, right? It could be an audit hold, could be
Correct.
a bunch of different holds.
Yeah, it could be for audit purpose. So in the States, at least, legal hold has kind of become a catch-all. We actually had a conversation about this on our last call where someone said, is there any move to try and change this? There's a whole effort to update the ARMA glossary. And I know they're looking at all the terms. I don't know absolutely for sure they're looking at legal hold in a way that's going to result in a change, but certainly they're going to better define it so that people understand that if you say legal hold or hold, you mean for internal investigation, for an audit, internal or external, for tax purposes. Maybe your tax year has been extended because of a filing. And so you're going to, even though the documents would normally be up for disposition, you're going to extend them until you sort through this tax issue or whatever that is. That's really the idea there. And yeah, legal holds will probably be changed to something else eventually. I don't know what that is. What I didn't want to do as our working group is tell the working group that's doing the glossary update what the term should be.
Right.
They're the experts there. If they come up with a new term or a newly defined term, we'll adopt that term on the next update to the model. So Ken had a comment. Thank you for that. So Ken says he likes this better. However, he has lots of clients who have permanent storage as a final disposition option. Well, so if it's permanent storage, it's not disposition, I would argue, under the traditional model. I know some people look at disposition as not just destruction, but transferring to another organization, including long-term storage. So for archival purposes, yes. But that's why it's a model. No model is perfect. So Ken, love the feedback, and I'll make sure I share that with the next working group to see if there's a different way we can represent that to represent those types of cases. Yeah, legal hold, to your point, as we said, is being used for a variety of different things. Probably we should come up with another term. My challenge there is if we're the only ones who do it, do we just confuse the market, right? So if the rest of the information related fields continue using the term legal hold, are we now out of sync with everyone else?
Right. Good point.
I'd like to think we've got enough of influence that we could drive that conversation. I realistically don't think we do. We can influence it, but I don't think we can drive it. That's just my opinion. Right. So thank you for those comments, Ken. Very, very excellent feedback. Thank you. Oh, wrong button. All right. So we did all this work, but there's still more work to be done. Rick, you know this from what, you're on your third update of the principles now?
Yep. That'll be the third. Yep.
Yeah. So, these types of models, these big, broad concepts that are so important to what we do as professionals, they're never really done. They need to be updated and maintained as the field changes, as the profession changes, as requirements of what we do changes. We have more work ahead of us, and we're going to continue to do that. So what are some of the things we're talking about? Well, we will be launching an IGIM 3.0 working group. If anyone on this call is interested in volunteering for that, look for that announcement. You can also reach out to me directly. The creation of that working group will probably not happen until after summer, only because we've got a couple other working groups that are going on that the work that they're doing will likely have some impact on what we do with the IGIM. That includes the glossary working group that I've mentioned before just a few moments ago. And a couple times we've mentioned that Rick and others are working on an update of the principles. Once the principles have been fully updated, we'll want to make sure we're using the same language, the same references. And as a separate part of our work, we're going to want to make sure that there's proper alignment where it's appropriate between the IGIM and the principles so that everything's all nice and tight and bound together. As part of the version 3 update to the IGIM, we are going to revisit the entire model. And that includes how the model is structured and also the images and graphics. There's a couple points I pointed out where there's overlap between some of the subdomains, and that, maybe they're not as separate as the individual wedges of the wheel make them look. So how do we represent those connections? Do we maybe make the wedges touch or overlap in some way? So those are things we're thinking. Maybe we abandon the wedges altogether and go with a different graphic, but all of it's on the table this time around, because one of the things we're seeing is this separation is less distinct clearly than it used to be when the model was maybe first developed. We've created content for each of the top level domains. We will create similar levels of content for each of the subdomains. So that means this becomes a very hefty publication really quickly. I suspect that the final release of IGIM 3.0, including all the supporting content, will probably clock in somewhere around 200 pages with all the graphics and the designs and the tables and everything else that we include in a release like that. And the glaring omission by choice this time to version 2.1 is that we did not include artificial intelligence. We felt that that was probably too fundamental of a change for this to have been a 2.1 version of the model. And within the working group, we've come closer to it, but early on, we couldn't come to a consensus. One, if AI even belonged in the model. I think we have a consensus there that now that it does. But now we're debating, where in the model does it belong? Does it belong in just one domain? Does it belong in multiple parts of the domain? Do we need to differentiate between, how the AI is used, a large language model versus a predictive model or something like that? So all that's up for discussion. So again, if anyone on this call has strong feelings on any of those topics, please be sure to volunteer once the call for volunteers goes out. Again, that will likely come out after summer. We may do the announcement at InfoCon when some other announcements are made, wrapping up some other bodies of work that the next round of IGIM work will be dependent on. We will do that alignment with the ARMA principles. One of the reasons we're holding off on launching the version 3 working group is the principles working group is only recently just reconfigured, and want to give them enough of a head start so that we can make sure any changes that they make get properly reflected in the IGIM if necessary. And then once the version 3 of the of the IGIM model is released, we are going to look at developing an IGIM maturity model that will look at the various components of the IGIM as it comes out in version 3 and develop a tool so that organizations can rate themselves against the standard components of IGIM and help determine, what projects they should tackle, what priorities need to be, maybe elevated over others, and those types of things. So that is really all work to come. I will probably still be on the committee long enough to get that working group started, but my tenure on the committee will likely have come to an end by then. So maybe I'll just be a volunteer at that point instead of leading the charge. But that is basically what we've done and what we've got planned. We have a few minutes if anyone has any questions. You can just put that in the chat. I see a couple comments here. Donna said, I think the model is great and the next steps are tools to support the information, checklists, templates. Absolutely. One of the ways we're trying to leverage the IGIM better for anyone who was lucky or able to attend the InfoNext conference in Savannah. And InfoNext is what MER has become now that ARMA has merged and acquired it. Every one of the sessions at InfoNext had to be tied to one of the top level domains of the model so that that session could be used to help further an organization's implementation of that piece of the model. So those sessions often have checklists and working aids. And so we'll get a lot of it that way. But yeah, great suggestion. As we build out the content for each of the subdomains, thinking of practical ways to make that content useful is always a good idea. And case studies. I can't wait to see. I have a case study I want to do. I just got to get the client to give me permission. I don't know if they will. Large vehicle manufacturer here in the US, recently acquired by a large German manufacturer out of Europe, obviously. So, is there an IG maturity assessment that an organization can take? So yes and no. There is an organization called the CGOC, Compliance Governance. I forget what the CGOC stands for. It is an industry think tank that unfortunately appears to have gone defunct because of COVID. But they used to get together on a regular basis, publish white papers, publish articles. They did a conference in New York and in San Francisco, I believe, or maybe it was San Diego, each year at opposite ends of the calendar. They released an information governance's processes maturity model, and I absolutely love it. I use it all the time with clients these days when I do consulting assessments for them. It's readily available on the internet. It's all public domain stuff. Just Google CGOC maturity model. You'll find it. I find it to be a very useful tool. It is in need of some updating, but you can use that as a start to develop your own or to refine the areas, or just focus on one of the sub areas. I've had clients where I've used the entire model end to end and did an assessment for them. And then when I was in-house at Citadel, my leadership really only wanted me to focus on a couple aspects of that maturity model. And so we focused our efforts there rather than doing a full assessment. So I think that's a really good tool. The principles maturity model, unfortunately, in a reversion of the principles, someone did a find and replace and swapped out records management for information governance, and are trying to say, oh, now it's an information governance model. It's not. It's still a record keeping model. But if you do need to do an assessment of your maturity around core record keeping practices, I think that model is still excellent and very useful. I know that will be going through some updates once the principles themselves
Totally agree.
are updated. But those are available to you as well. There was one other organization, one of the tech companies had released a maturity model. I don't know if it was, maybe it was just a model. Don't quote me. I can look into it if you really need to know, Meredith. You can just contact me separately. Happy to. I had it in a presentation, so I can dig it up and send it over to you if you'd like. There are other models, and some of our vendor partners build off of the tools that ARMA has released and build models of their own. I think Iron Mountain has developed a maturity index that they use sometimes. I know others have. Some of them they claim are proprietary. Some of them have them for free, or at least versions of them for free on their website. So always check those. Many of them are built off of the work that ARMA has done, but that they've then tweaked based on who their client base is. Any other questions, comments, feedback? We have a few more minutes.
I don't see any more that we might have missed.
Do you have a sense of how the IGM is being accepted internationally? I don't, honestly. One of the things we did at InfoNext is one of the sessions was to break all the attendees out into working groups and discuss, how does information governance more broadly get better adopted within the culture and DNA of an organization. What was nice about that working group, those working group breakouts, is there was a fairly good international representation considering it was a smaller conference. We had representatives from the Bahamas, Canada, Japan, South Africa, a couple others. I'm not recalling all of them. The good news is most of them are familiar with the concept of information governance. There is less clarity about how different, if it is different from records management. I would argue it is. I know, Rick, you would argue it is. I think probably some of us on this call who are familiar with information governance would argue they are tightly coupled but distinct disciplines. So there was a little less clarity around that. So I would extrapolate that to say that if there's confusion around IG, the model itself is probably not as well adopted as it could be, but that's where we just need to keep chugging along and improving it and making it more useful.
It's an evolutionary process, Jason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, we're virtually at the top of the hour here, and I just wanted to thank all of the people on the session today. Again, all the names or most of the names are quite familiar to me, so Good to see everybody on. There's a lot of really high-level records and information management people on on the session today, Jason. So very, very good comments coming in. And many of us in this group that were on the session today have had these discussions before amongst ourselves too. So thank you so much, Jason, for coming on and being the kind of resident expert on the topic today. And I believe you are the resident expert on the topic. So I'm looking forward to the version 3 working group when we get to that stage. I'm really excited to be.
That'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, no, for sure it will be.
I can't believe it's June already.
And of course, our chair of the committee for the ARMA Principles revamp is on the call as well. That's Ellie Kim, and Ellie's the chair of that committee group, and love Ellie to pieces too. So we're gonna have some good times working through that as well. I'm really excited about being on that committee. Thanks, Ellie, for allowing me to take part. That's it. Again, we'll keep doing high-level sessions for on the Learn with Us topic stream. Hopefully, Jason will do another. I'd really like to do an information governance session on building an information governance committee and what those people might look like in that committee and how that might fit together and the personalities that might be involved and that kind of thing. I think that would be a useful high-level topic to talk about in relation to information governance as well for all those people that want to take a run at it. The other last thing I want to say about information governance before we leave too is that if you're trying to do information governance at all, please fill in the survey when ARMA puts it out. Please put your information in the survey. Doesn't matter if you're in the really early stages, if anything's been done at all, if you think you're not doing well at it, if there's been a problem with it, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just put in your information, and that will help us get a better handle on where everybody's at on information governance in the world right now. So please put your information into the survey when it comes out. And thank you so much again, everybody, for coming on, and look forward to seeing everybody in person, some of you in person soon, and again on the next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Troy.
Bye.
Thanks, Jason.